the biggest stress bankers I see having right now is this hits right at the pride of what we take pride in doing. And that is we haven't been able to meet every need, every application. The demand, obviously, and as they said from the moment the bill passed, overwhelmed what the supply was going to be able to provide nationally for $350 billion. So banks, first of all, I'll say, let me just take a minute and speak to the industry and not just our bank. I mean, this isn't an ad for our bank. I saw many great stories and heard many great stories about many big and small banks playing a crucial role in getting this capital out to the market. I mean, that was as crazy, and some of the negative experiences some of you may possibly experience personally. On the whole, that was the best avenue versus trying to line up in front of the SBA and get government to issue money out or set something up brand new. It did change. This was the most dynamically changing thing I've ever seen happen to it. It launched on April 3rd. It was out of money by April 16th. And every day in between there seemed to be a little additional guidance or a tweak to the system that banks had to then update systems, let accounting know. There's so much flow through. So bankers, I will tell you, we're trying to keep our bravest face on for customers. We want customers to know the money that is available. We will get to them as we go through the applications. But at the same time, it is stressful. I will say that but I will also say, I think we're also motivated by, and this is my opinion, the last one was a lot of banks' faults. This has been a unique opportunity for banks to kind of have the redemption to step up and I think deliver something in this situation and show why we exist as an essential service. So on the whole, I think we're taking pride in being able to play an active role. We're frustrated that we can't meet every need like we typically do in our conventional day-to-day when we qualify people for a loan. We're eager to see what the potential next round looks like. And I think one thing I'll add, in talking about PPP right quick, if you applied before and did not get approved or processed through before the money ran out, I will say the buzz I seem to be hearing in the industry is that banks are first going to prioritize pending applications from the first round if a second one comes through before they open back up for taking new applications. So they don't want to let the next fastest gun sling and get an application in and then block out the hundreds of others who didn't get a chance. But then again, hopefully we can even make it through that. So don't be surprised when this new round opens up if you contact your bank and you didn't apply before, if they're not taking applications right away at the beginning until they can help try to get others through who did initially apply and have still been waiting.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate that. Yeah, confusing times all around for, great that the funds are theoretically there, but it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. We have a couple questions here. So here's one from Diane Gibbs. I'd love to know what are some of the hardest decisions you've had to make and how quickly you've made them. Really, that's up for anybody. Dave, Amie, as entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear what's been difficult for you recently, decision-wise.
Well, I wouldn't say it was recently, but I think apropos to these times, I mean, layoffs are, it's a brutal decision to make. I mean, especially in entrepreneurial companies where teams are close and all these people because it's not a large company. And so that is psychologically just a very challenging decision in my mind, but it flows back to what I was saying earlier. It's a really hard decision, and you will make your future life easier as a company if you make it quickly and put yourself in a better position to survive.
Dave, we lost you there in that last couple of seconds.
Do you have me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking about how challenging layoffs are, but in the final analysis, doing it as quickly as you can actually puts you in a better position. As quickly as you need to is a better way to put it. It puts you in a better position to survive very challenging circumstances like we're in now.
Yeah. Great point. Amie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, it's the same. I think the people part of it is probably the hardest. I think some of the other challenges that we may have may not be as personal as the layoff. So I did have to go through that recently with someone on my team, and the negative is just having to do that clearly. But I think on the positive side, the person is somebody that as soon as things do turn around, which I actually think for my personal business will be in May. And as soon as certain projects get started, that I can bring that person back. So I haven't had the experience of having to, get rid of a full team, which I know people that have. And so, but I do think the people pieces of it are the hardest versus some of the other decisions we may have to make. So I just wanted to piggyback on that.
Yeah, and I'll actually throw my 2 cents worth in on that. I run a small consulting and coaching firm, and for me, the big decision has been to sell or not to sell right now. Or if I am selling, how am I selling, right? So, and to be honest with you, I'm still struggling with those decisions, right? And making them day by day. The big thing for me has been listening to the counsel of people who are around me. Sometimes because they're smarter than me on topics like that, and sometimes just because I need the clarity of someone who's a bit disassociated from my business to help me think through some of these big decisions. I've got some more questions here in the chat box. For Evan, how are the banks reacting to the real estate market? Are you still doing jumbo or portfolio loans?
Yeah. So what I'll say to that, so my team actually doesn't cover the real estate side, but what I do know about our bank and our bank's strategy that's been well communicated across, we haven't stopped doing anything. But just like my point at the beginning, what the forward-looking risk management and underwriting is, obviously the big risk there is less we're seeing, a devalue in assets so much as you're going to see devalue and debt service coverage and cash flows of rents being paid if it's non-owner occupied and it's investment property. But I mean, obviously that I would say that's just speaking that nothing in our bank has been announced as being turned off or shut down. Obviously, every bank's gonna, depending on the size of their portfolio, the focus they have. Some banks are more real estate focused than others. But for who you work with in your own bank is definitely a question to ask individual banks that if you're inquiring in terms of finding financing. So I mean, nothing's really turned off in the industry. I think so much as everyone is in portfolio management mode. What is the status of what we've currently underwritten, our quality control? But that is obviously is going to play into a risk as to how much those are funded going forward in the short, especially the short term, as rent is a hard thing for more than 20 to 25 million Americans to pay right now.
Evan, you're a pretty popular guy in these questions here. There's a lot of people wanting to know about the money side of it. Here's another one. So many small businesses were blocked out of the first round. Did the banks prioritize larger clients that had existing lending relationships, and the money is not getting to the entrepreneurs and small businesses with employees under 10 people? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I agree that the research, the info, and the transparent information that we're trying to get out of reports did show, I think nationally, and even to the point nationally, that very larger of the small business size, when you look at who qualifies under the SBA guidelines of size, received a decent chunk, and even some have kind of developed conscience. I know Shake Shack in New York has developed this kind of remorse and is turning some of it back in. So for Pacific Western, I asked that question the other day because I want to know, are we being more helpful than harmful? So our average size was about, I think, 400,000 to 500,000 versus the 5 to 10 million range size clients. So we have such a large portfolio of small businesses. So I will say that banks, as part of this, were, without being officially asked, are prioritizing existing businesses. So we even have customers on my team in small business that we just have a single product with, but maybe they don't have their deposit account with us. We actually recommended some of them, as they were starting to research this before the funds were issued, to go there to that primary bank that has their largest relationship, for two reasons. One, the depth of information they already have on hand about that company, and that they can help expedite the process for, versus learning a new borrower. The other side of banking is what we call KYC, or knowing our customer. It's a regulatory guideline that makes sure that we understand, for security and national security reasons, who borrowers are, who customers are, because a lot of this is happening not in person, obviously, day to day, and even especially now, that existing banks could expedite and go past a lot of that customer identification protocol because they'd already have it on hand for borrowers within the bank. And so banks already processing their own borrowers' loan applications for PPP and everything are already overwhelming the system alone. My concern is that there maybe are smaller businesses too who have not developed strong banking relationships previously, or at least known who to call in a time of need, that are now probably feeling a little more left out. And I'm a little optimistic reading the early headlines on the next package. They're trying to put a chunk of money out, but perhaps carve certain amounts out for tiered levels of businesses, so it doesn't all end up to one side or the other. But I understand that frustration, and I think that's kind of the product of a quick response, quick action, a quick process that was very dynamic, that's very imperfect, but it was something and the best that kind of the government and industry could do together.
Thanks for that. Amie and Dave, we've got a question here about how firms should be choosing whether to preserve cash or try to adapt to market changes. And love to hear your thoughts on that. What are you guys thinking about?
Amie, you want to take that first?
Sure. Unfortunately, it's both, right? It's thinking about both things. But I think that the balance there is, again, this is just my personal belief, but I don't think every business is obviously different, but I think these changes are going to be here for a little bit. And so you have to adapt. I don't think that's really an option for a small business. So you have to figure out, I think it was Evan that mentioned earlier, the customer behaviors. And I think you do have to start thinking about who your existing customers are versus who are some other potential customers that you can go after, and really understanding what do the markets look like, the industries look like, which ones will come back from this maybe later in the year or next year, which ones won't. So I do think you have to focus on adapting, but at the same time, you have to be prepared for a month that you don't have the business you expected. And so you need those cash reserves as well. So it is one of those challenging things that you have to focus a little bit on both things at the same time.
Yeah, I've been a CFO 5 times, and it's hard to argue against conserving cash here, because in the uncertainty climate that we're talking about here, we just don't know how long this is going to last. And so having some cushion, as Amie just referred to, I think is essential. And it's a really hard balance to draw as to what is an essential activity or expenditure and conservation of cash, but that has to be top of mind in times like these.
And Evan, on the same note, what do banks want to see their customers doing?
Good question. I think that in terms of, so there's so many different loan types, right? So there's different types of businesses in terms of what makes a loan. I'll steal Dave's exact words. It's hard to argue against the liquidity factor right now. I mean, even on, I know one service that we affect where we use a level of liquidity, or liquidity ratio, if you will, in terms of determining amount of debt off a borrower. We've tightened that in to not extend as much based on just that liquidity alone, so that they would have more liquidity remaining compared to the amount of debt we would issue. I know on the venture side, it started in that world years ago, and I've been out of that one for the last several years. I just know in general, for my time on the first one and these kind of same times, the runway that they're going to need, because, as valuations are being watched, the active follow-on or investing that's happening in high growth is going to pause, if you will, right now, like a lot of us are, and see where things land. And so the runway they need, and they're making their decisions on staff and things we've already talked about. So, cash is king in the banking world. I mean, we never want to, the intention is not to loan out so deeply, not just, we're mainly a commercial bank versus a consumer bank, but I know from being formerly at a bank that was both, you don't want to lend out to the level that, someone's, cash is below their debt in life, right? Mortgage is kind of the exception there, but operating capital, working capital, we still want to see liquidity to know that those facilities are being used in growth in helpful ways and not in, de facto bridge loan ways that they'll have a hard time repaying in the end. So on conventional side, I think it is tightened right now because I think that is the last, in some ways, thing you should be looking to do to solve any of this problem right now versus figure out how to live with what you've got. So yeah, that's a broad question, but I can just say from a general industry level, again, to the risk management looking forward, it'll be a while of wanting to see people with liquidity on their balance sheet, especially with that being cash, because other liquidity sources like receivables are going to slow down depending on who's in those receivables, what those are made up of, and who's going to be paying them. So I don't really have anything more to add to that than what I think Dave kind of capitalized on too.
Thanks for that. Got another question here about contractors and whether or not people are asking their contractors to do the same work for less. I've had a little experience with that, but I'd love to hear from the panelists. Either whether you've asked contractors to do the same for less, or whether you have been a contractor who has been asked to do the same for less.
Seems like a great Amie question.
I'm trying to think here. So for me personally, in our business, the answer would be no. We do have a business model where I have a very small internal team of employees and actually do outsource to quite a few people, mostly creative people. So video and writing and things like that for the marketing services that we offer. And so for me, it's in that aspect, business as usual. If I'm hiring you to do something, I'm not really asking people to do more work than what I'm paying them for, things like that. We either have the project work or we don't. So I'm certainly not able to keep them staffed at the same levels. But if I'm asking them to work, certainly I'm not asking them to do more than what I would pay them for.
I would think too, on the other side, if you are a company who is asked to do that, you probably wouldn't be asked that by an established company. And if a early stage company asks me to do that, they need to give you something in exchange. So, maybe asking for warrants or something like that if you're working with an early stage startup, because I wouldn't do it without getting something in return. And I think would be a reasonable request.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually offered to one of my clients to not to work for less, but instead to suspend invoicing for a couple of months just to give them a little bit of lead time. It's a risk, but it was a client that I already had a deep relationship with. There's a lot of trust. And as executive coach, I was invested in seeing them through the end of their coaching journey. So just felt like the right thing to do with that particular point. I don't know that I'd recommend it for everyone.
I'd also point out one example I heard of too, because I think creativity in this time is really important. It was someone who owns a salon and who rents out chairs. And what they had done is they were not requiring the people who rent their chairs to pay while they're shut down. And then when they restart, they are going to start up rents again. But then what they owe, they're going to pay off 10% at a time each month. So I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of spread out what they owed over time and not overburden, two sets of people who were, I guess, not doing well during this time because of lack of cash flow. So I think creativity is really important, but also to make sure that you're not devaluing yourself.
So we have a question here that be interesting if anyone has their crystal ball out and can answer it. It's when do you guys think that North Carolina is going to reopen? What's your best guess? Do you have one?
I don't have a guess. I think there was a blip of an article today I saw on WRAL that was kind of hedging at what Cooper's 3-phase plan was about, starting with activities that would let people go get outside of their home first in a limited way, then it's reestablishing what businesses could be open would be phase 2, and which would be further down. Then phase 3, which had no timetable to it, was large venue gatherings. And so that's right now they're not even basing it on, it's kind of mental health seems to phase one. How do we make sure people don't go insane inside? Number two is how do we ease things in? But there, even the government, who's calculating this stuff day and night, and with key experts, is unable to put a finger on it. And it's all just going to, this is 10 years ago. It was a core economic crisis that rippled into everything else. This is a global health crisis that's rippling through everything else. So we're not at the mercy of how quickly can we right set an industry necessarily, or right set the banking, getting financial industry back in order, like we were before. This is a virus that is agnostic to a lot of things that we can't control. And so those who are trying to rein it in are doing what they can. And we're going to be at the mercy of that and the unpredictability of recurrence. So I sure wish we had a crystal ball on that, and we'd all be making a lot of money at that point.
Yeah, I really don't have any idea. I mean, I think we've obviously been affected at a different level here than compared to the hot spots in Michigan, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York. And so there's probably, I'm no epidemiologist, but there's probably a reasonable argument that we open more quickly and are back to business as usual before those guys are. But I just don't know how quickly it will go. That's that uncertainty I was talking about earlier. I mean, it's caused so much disruption. We had a wedding planned in our family this summer for June, and no more. So, we've all suffered those kind of effects.
On a similar sort of note, this idea of isolation, a question that was asked in the pre-survey was around how to ensure collaboration in times of isolation. I'd love to hear sort of best practices, whether it's from your own organization or from folks that you have talked to. What seems to be working well in terms of ensuring some sort of collaboration and people not feeling any more isolated than they need to be?
I'll tell you one I've really enjoyed. My wife is a national sales account executive at SAS, and her team leader has organized Friday 4 p.m. mandatory happy hour for that team. And the participation level has been great, and spouses are allowed, and that's just a great way for everybody that's on a work team to stay in touch.
Mm. Yeah, one thing I could hear at one of my employees' voices the other day. It just kind of dropped overnight. Like the day before, he was all upbeat, and what's happening is just adjusting to things that can't move as quickly in a remote environment for a bank, which we have remote capabilities have grown in the industry as the years have gone on, but a lot of our history has been built on centralized location work. And so as we are getting smarter, and I think pulling through this, and next time, God forbid next time, but when another time happens, we'll be even better prepared. I think it's just very tiring. And I told him, I said, it's really easy during stay-at-home work to think that somehow it's a blended amount of work and PTO. I said, just the opposite. I want you to find 1, 2, or even 3 days in the next 2 weeks that you're going to turn in PTO to me and not log in, not check your phone, not worry if I need you that day. Not worry, I won't worry if I need you, and I'll cover for you. And then same goes for me. We talk about one of the stressful things is the personal professional balance. And right beyond this door to my left are 3 kids probably lined up ready to do puzzles and Legos. And, so I've got the feeling of not letting work and family down is a hard burden to bear for us as humans. And so I think being able to just completely understand that if you are still in the fortunate group of working, that the health step to observe certain things that you would observe not in this situation, like time away from your work, because right now it's been put in your home, is important. And I think one of the ways that isolation won't hit you as hard professionally if you can refresh personally a little more.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to, I think I agree with what they both said, and I certainly know of other partner companies that are doing like the happy hour, trying to do different games, challenges that people can do mobile. One suggestion or one thing that I've been doing that I think has been helpful is just reaching out to people, even beyond your employees. Some of my employees do have families and they're adjusting to that, but personally, like I don't have a family, I don't have kids, so I'm here by myself. And there are other folks in our network that are by themselves. And I think it hasn't bothered me so much, but it has been really tough and stressful for people who live alone. And one of the things I started doing, just like you would grab coffee with someone, you know, in a regular situation, is just, hey, let's just hop on the phone. Let's have a quick video call. Not really to talk about anything work related, but just to check in and just make sure people are okay. And I've noticed that that's been really helpful for people who don't have like a family right there that they can see all the time and interact with all the time. And so that's, you know, it's not really work collaboration, but just on a personal level, the collaboration that people can do for each other just to check in and just make sure people are okay.
All great tips. Just through that wall are my wife and my son and daughter, who are doing a HIT class. That the one's a student at NC State, the other's alum, and the other's an employee at NC State. And so they're members of the gym, and they're able to log in and do a HIT class. So there's all sorts of things out there, and the key is to get people to actually do those things. We got a couple more questions, and then just fair warning to the panelists, I'd love to hear your final thoughts. But let's see here. One more question. Any tips, and maybe this could be part of your final thoughts really, any tips for anybody that will be restarting their business after this?
So you're saying, can you repeat that one, Scott?
Sure. The question is, are there any tips for people who will be restarting their business after this?
As in they had to close down because of it?
Sounds like it, yes.
Okay. I think the advice I would give is really, which can obviously be done now, but kind of assessing what we were talking about earlier, who your targets are, who your target customer base is, and kind of what their needs are at the time that you plan to reopen. Again, we don't know when kind of reopen is, so we don't know what the situation will look like at that time. But I think at least trying to plan ahead and identify who are some target customers that you can go after, and starting to research that, talk to people about that at a bigger level or at a strategic level, just thinking about how you would formulate that business, I think would be helpful.
I always go back to the psychology, and I think that's what I would say here is that you had a business, you were in a certain state, maybe you were happy with that state and you were in a good place. And if you're having to restart, you're in a completely different place, and you need to reorient your head around that and just come at it anew and do the things that you would have done X months or X years ago when you were starting, because you won't be in the same place and you'll have different tasks, different priorities, and different key success factors to get to where you want to get to again.
Yeah, all that, and kind of revisiting a topic I mentioned at the beginning, if I'm a business owner, or even what I'll be doing as a, in the banking side, and looking at who our customers are, is how is the paradigm and habits going to change? It's changed with innovation. It's changed with, all kinds of stimulus factors that have happened in our economy and world, both up and down. So I would be using this time so that when you are ready to open the doors, is what kind of reorientation needs to be done that will help you not just open your doors, but begin creating demand that you can look to supply.
Yeah, great thoughts. One thing I'll share, look, the Entrepreneurship Center at Keenan Flagler, we're a business like any other, and we're doing exactly what these folks are saying, is we are taking our opportunity now to reset during the pause, to rethink our strategic plan for how we're going to be moving forward when we launch the great reboot after the great pause. And I think it's a smart thing for everybody to do, whether you're a company of one or a company of many. If you are a company of one, especially, I urge you to reach out to those people that you think of as advisors, that you think of as people who can offer you some wisdom, or even just a sympathetic ear right now. If you don't have any of those people, then reach out to some of us, and I'm sure you'll find plenty of help from the people on this panel. I've been asked to give a plug for next week's session. It's on the 30th, and the topic will be how to operate effectively in the new normal. Experts in marketing and sales, I believe. So please join us for that. Also, Keisha has just posted in the comments section a link to a survey, a post-event survey. We really, really value your opinion. It helps us to make sure that we're delivering content that's important to you and that's relevant to you. So please do fill that out so that we can continue to be useful. From our panelists, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just encourage everybody to keep positive thoughts in your head. I've been through the 87, the 2000, 2001, the 2008, 2009. And yes, that means I graduated from Keenan Flagler a long time ago. But these things are always painful and they force us to do things that we don't want to do. But this has always been an extremely resilient country and economy. And we'll come out on the other side with, quite a few changes, I'm sure. But I think we'll come out and be in great shape again. And we always have to keep our eyes focused on that.
And I'll add positivity. Certainly, I agree with that. As much as you can, try to stay positive. And the other thing I would add is it's sometimes hard to think outside of yourself a little bit and think not only about your situation and your family situation, but there are so many people who probably have it worse than you. And then, of course, there are people who have it better than you. And so thinking about it that way, because there are people you can reach back out to and help them, but there are also people who are open to helping you. And so just, get advice like has been mentioned. If you need someone to talk to, there are people you can reach out to, but there are also people that you can probably help too. So just really thinking about a little bit beyond yourself when you can, and how you can help other people make it through.
Yeah. And I think what I found with me, I felt this a little even internally working with partners in a different environment, just taking a slightly longer breath in between expressing my thoughts. Everything is a little more rushed, frustrated. Like Amie said, because we're more isolated physically, everything in my world is at this desk right now and is important to me. And so we've now divided out of collaborative rooms and we're all thinking different thoughts. And so I guess I mentioned this to Scott when we were talking about this panel earlier. I don't want to forget, not just behind the economy, but just the humanity is the thing we all have in common right now. I mean, again, there's varying levels of opportunity people continue to have through this or not. I will tell you on the community development side with our bank, I do work with the effort to put social investment into distressed communities and underprivileged areas with our grant fund. So I firsthand witness and talk to a lot of the people directing those efforts in the Triangle. And I will tell you that I would bet money that there is some stress that some of us will not have to feel. Some of us are, I'm not saying everyone, but some of us will not have to feel that many are just being compounded with right now. So try for those currently still able to keep going, look for areas to be generous. I think at a distance, that's the best thing you can do right now for safety. If you've got capacity to be generous, keep looking for opportunities to do that. And then second, just patience and taking a deep breath, because each of us want to do well for our jobs and everyone around us. And that's challenging to do because we're now broken out into so many different pieces now. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I love it. I think the theme there is be kind to yourself and look for opportunities to be kind to others as well. And that's a great way to wrap this up. And with that, Vicki, I'd love to pass it off to you for any final words.
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone. Scott, thank you for moderating. Amie, Evan, Dave, thank you so much for being panelists. And for everyone who's here, thank you so much for your questions and your interactions with each other. Our goal right here is that we are going to get through this together. We do see this as a partnership and a community. So please keep that in mind. One of the things that Amie shared with me as she was sharing her story with y'all, but also with me when we caught up on the phone, is that when she took her break trying to figure out her own career, is that self-reflection was a really important piece that made her into the person that she is today and the leader she is today. So take those times to yourself to really be reflective, to take advantage of the time, not only with yourself, but if you have a family, with your family, and make sure we can look at the positive as well as some of the challenges, because it's that hopefulness that will get us through to the other side as well, and the community connection. So thanks again for being here. Hope to see y'all here next week. And thanks again to the panelists and Scott for your time. Y'all take care.
Thank you.